Good morning, Year 12 and 13. I said good morning, Year 12 and 13. The Lord be with you. We thought it would be important for you to maintain some normality whilst you're not at school and to keep to your normal routine. And therefore, as it's Wednesday, we thought we would have an assembly this morning. Now, virtual assembly is obviously a bit different to how we normally do things, and it is the first time for us, so please bear with us. Today's assembly will focus on the theme of the day, which you may have realised what it is if you can still remember what the date or even the day is. It is April the 1st, and therefore it is April Fool's Day.
Okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the origins of April Fools. So the custom of playing jokes on people on April the 1st has been around for a really long time, although no one really knows what started the tradition. The 1st of April begins to be mentioned consistently by authors in the 18th century, but by that point it was already an established custom. The most popular theory is that the tradition started in France in the 16th century. The new year used to begin on Easter, and this was to commemorate the rising of Christ, and it was common throughout Christian countries. But because the date of Easter Sunday changes according to the lunar cycle, it's always the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the spring equinox. This means that the new year was often on a different date. So the king decided to begin the new year on January the 1st instead, as it is now. And many people didn't actually hear about the change in the calendar, and many others just stubbornly held on to the old calendar, and they continued to celebrate the new year in April, as it used to be. And these people became known as the Poisson d'Avril, or the April fish, and people made fun of them and played jokes on them. So another popular theory is that the tradition stems from renewal festivals. So a renewal festival is a celebration of the end of winter and the return of spring, and they've been celebrated by lots of different cultures throughout history. Renewal festivals usually involve disorder and mayhem and the temporary inversion of the social order. Some of these ancient festivals would have slaves order their masters around, or children get to be in charge of their parents, but the disorder would usually only be allowed to go on until noon, and then normality would be restored again. And as you can see, that's quite similar to the way we actually celebrate April Fools.
So April Fool's Day is celebrated in many different countries across the world and in many different ways. As I'm sure you're probably aware, in the UK it is traditional to play pranks or tricks on your friends or family and then say April Fools. However, this can only be done before midday, an unfamiliar time period for most of you. Or else the person playing tricks is the April Fool. So in Ireland, it was traditional to entrust the victim of the prank with an important letter to be given to a named person. That person would read the letter and then ask the victim to take it to someone else, and so on. The letter, when opened, contained the words, "Send the fool further." So as I'm sure you can imagine, if you were the recipient of that, you just got led on and on and on. For some reason, it is also common to prank call zoos in Ireland and ask for Albert Ross or an antelope. In Greece, water from rainfall on April the 1st is said to have healing properties, and we could all do with some of that right now. If you can successfully trick someone on this day in Greece, you will have good luck all year long
and a year of good crops.
In both Brazil and Germany, news outlets put out ridiculous fake news stories and people tell white lies to each other. In Scotland, a foolish person is called a gowk, and therefore April Fool's Day is known as Hunt the Gowk Day. It's celebrated in the first 2 days of April, and the second day is referred to as Taily Day, where pranks are focused on the rear of the victim. This is thought to be the origin of taping the word "kick me" to someone's back. On April Fool's Day in France, children aim to stick paper fish onto the backs of as many adults as possible and then run away yelling "Poisson d'Avril," which means April fish. In Sweden and Denmark, April Fool's Day occurs on both the 1st of April and the 1st of May. This is thought to be as a result of the erratic weather and when spring will actually arrive. And finally, in Portugal, April Fool's Day is celebrated, but on a different date, the 2 days prior to Lent. The Portuguese celebrate this by throwing flour into each other's faces.
So, some of you might not know this about me, but I am actually somewhat of a professional prankster. At least I was back in my school days. So Me personally, I just wouldn't fall victim to any of those pranks. But what I will do now, in my expertise and position as a past prankster, is to talk to you about some of my favourite April Fool's pranks in the past. I just need to grab my glasses. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so some of the biggest and best April Fool's pranks are linked with reputable organisations. So in 1976, a famous astronomer, Sir Patrick Moore, went on BBC Radio 2 and made the announcement that a once-in-a-lifetime alignment of Pluto and Jupiter would affect the gravitational pull of Earth and temporarily reduce Earth's gravity. He told listeners to jump at exactly 9:48 and they would feel themselves temporarily float. This was completely false. But at 9:48, the phone lines were flooded with people reporting that they had levitated for a short amount of time, at which point Sir Moore confessed that it was in fact a prank. But my favourite April Fool's prank was carried out by the BBC in 1957. They aired a 3-minute hoax documentary about spaghetti farm in Switzerland. Here's a short clip from it.
Past winter, one of the mildest in living memory, has had its effect in other ways as well. Most important of all, it's resulted in an exceptionally heavy spaghetti crop. The last 2 weeks of March are an anxious time for the spaghetti farmer. There's always the chance of a late frost, which, while not entirely ruining the crop, generally impairs the flavour and makes it difficult for him to obtain top prices in world markets. But now these dangers are over, and the spaghetti harvest goes forward. Spaghetti cultivation here in Switzerland is not, of course, carried out on anything like the tremendous scale of the Italian industry. Many of you, I'm sure, will have seen pictures of the vast spaghetti plantations in the Po Valley. For the Swiss, however, it tends to be more of a family affair. Another reason why this may be a bumper year lies in the virtual disappearance of the spaghetti weevil, the tiny creature whose depredations have caused much concern in the past. After picking, the spaghetti is laid out to dry in the warm alpine sun. Many people are often puzzled by the fact that spaghetti is produced at such uniform length, but this is the result of many years of patient endeavour by plant breeders who've succeeded in producing the perfect spaghetti. And now the harvest is marked by a traditional meal. Toasts to the new crop are drunk in these poccolinos, and then the waiters enter bearing the ceremonial dish, and it is, of course, spaghetti, picked earlier in the day, dried in the sun, and so brought fresh from garden to table at the very peak of condition. For those who love this dish, there's nothing like real homegrown spaghetti.
So, I don't know what you thought about that, but I know that when I watched that for the first time, I found it quite believable. I think I actually did believe it, to be honest. And I'm not the only one. When it did air in the 50s, hundreds of people phoned in and wrote in to ask the BBC where they could get a spaghetti tree from and how one cultivates spaghetti. And the BBC replied to this: put a sprig of spaghetti into a tin of tomatoes and hope for the best.
We hope you have enjoyed today's informative April Fool's Assembly, and there are 2 key messages that we want you to take away from this. Sometimes it is unclear where traditions are born from or why they happen. Unlike most other traditions we have in this country, there appears to be no concrete basis for April Fool's Day, but perhaps it has stood the test of time as it simply brings joy to the nation to be a little bit silly sometimes. Celebrate this joy and build your own traditions out of nothing, particularly at times as challenging as this. Secondly, ensure that you do not take everything at face value. Don't follow the herd, make your own decisions about what you see and hear, and consider that even sources we might deem to be reliable, for example the BBC and their spaghetti tree, might not always be telling the whole story. Have a great day, everyone. Please stack your chairs at the front of the room and tables in groups of 2. And please ensure that you are doing work and that you are following the instructions on Google Classroom. So, happy Wednesday.